Good morning, everybody. Thank you, everybody, to attend this event. My name is Renato Tischauer. I'm at the board of the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce. First of all, I want to thank FAST for supporting and sponsoring this event.
Well, thank you all for coming, and thanks for the Chamber to host us once again. We've been here a couple of times, and we're very glad to have a partnership with the Chamber of Commerce here in the States. The subject of our conversation today is the COP, right? The COP30, which is going to take place in Brazil, in Belém, downstream from where we're based. We're based in Manaus, so traveling from Manaus to Belém is a short trip, 5 days by boat. For us, it's short. We work in communities that are sometimes 15 days away from Manaus. Imagine lunch and dinner, breakfast times 15. So we work in very remote areas. FAS is the largest civil society organization in the Amazon. We work in these areas with forest peoples for many, many years, 16 years, 28 million hectares that are include indigenous peoples' lands, protected areas, and also slums of places like Manaus and Iquitos. We work in other Amazon countries as well, not only in Brazil. This, I think, gives a flavor of what I see the COP being a great opportunity to increase concrete action, because we are not going for a COP for pledges. I think that's best. Unfortunately, we are at a tipping point for the Amazon. We are also at a tipping point for the planet. Just to give you one number, out of the last 14 months, 13 months were months of broken records of global temperature, according to the European Union monitoring center called Copernicus. Right? So we have crossed the 1.5 degrees in practice. What we saw in Brazil with the floods in Rio Grande do Sul is not something unexpected. It is something that was predicted by IPCC. The droughts in the Amazon also. So there is the science has two sides. One is right, and the other is has missed. The right part of the reports of IPCC is that 1.5 is really a threshold that has been crossed, and once crossed, there will be many, many extreme events and very strong events. But what makes scientists now very puzzled is the fact that this happened much earlier than expected. The worst case scenarios were for the 1.5 degree to be crossed in 2028, and we're doing that in 2024, 4 years earlier. So we're living in an emergency, and I think COP in Belém will follow COPs that are coming from the Middle East with a very strong focus on fossil fuels. I've been to 21 COPs myself, so I'm an old timer. I know a little bit of this arena. And the COP in Brazil is going to be the COP of nature, and nature and people. And the experience that I shared with you here in this video is an experience of a people-centered approach to deliver nature-based solutions. The Amazon is not only a bunch of plants and animals and water and so forth. It's a place with people. So there are indigenous peoples in voluntary isolation. We have 40% of the region with protection by indigenous peoples of various natures. In Brazil, we divide povos indígenas e populações tradicionais, traditional populations and indigenous people, but putting them all together is about 40%. And it is possible to overcome poverty. It is possible to bring prosperity for those forest guardians. And I think COP30, in my opinion, is an opportunity to build alliances, to strengthen action, bringing together two groups, business and civil society organizations with the backing of science. I think this is a job that we cannot rely on governments, unfortunately. Although governments are very important, but they're too slow, too bureaucratic, and the action that is required now is urgent. My definition is you have 10%, lots of people, 30,000, 50,000. I think Belém is going to have 100,000. That's my guess, my estimate. 90% of these people are not participating in negotiations, which are very boring. At some time in the past, I did participate in the negotiations, and I remember once we spent a whole morning discussing one paragraph, and the question was about the language, whether it was going to be should, must, shall, or will. And no, some said, no, it cannot be must. It has to be we shall do. The others, no, we should do, and so on, and put a bracket, and so it's very. But that's the business of diplomats. No, it's very important. I am a fan of the United Nations. I think the United Nations has limitations, but it's the best thing that we can have for international dialogue without the limitations that it has. So that's the official COP, which stands for Conference of the Parties. There are 190 plus countries that have signed this framework convention. That's the name of it. It comes from Rio. It was signed in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil in 1992. I was there as well. Was a fantastic event. You know, Brazilian diplomacy is extremely well recognized worldwide. So the Brazilian diplomacy is very professional. Itamaraty, which is our Ministry for Foreign Affairs, is very sophisticated, has a school and so on. So Brazil plays a very important role. So Brazil is putting together a number of things which are going to be very relevant for the official part. But a word of caution, don't expect too much of any COP, because you're going to be frustrated. I was frustrated many times, but I learned that the problem was not with the COP, the problem was with me, because I had high expectations. But imagine that you're going to come up with a text that on one side of the table is Israel, and on the other side of the table is Iran. On one side of the table is China, and on the other side is the US, and so on and so forth. So it's very hard to come up with a language that unites everybody. So it has to be mild. It cannot be ambitious. So that's the limitation of the Framework Convention, that everybody has to agree. So that's so much for the 10% of the COP. The 90% of the COP is thousands of conferences and meetings of various sorts of business. The presence of business in the COPs is amazing and is growing every year. I think probably in Glasgow, one was a tipping point in terms of increasing participation of business, but even before, business is playing a very important role, because the change we're talking about includes trillions of dollars. It's not in the order of billions. So we have to change the energy matrix, move away from fossil fuel. By the way, the biggest discussion in the last COP was transition away from or phase down. So there was a huge debate. Should we phase down fossil fuels or should we transition away? So the final wording was transition, not phase down. Very intense negotiations and so on. So in this COP this year is going to be in Baku in Azerbaijan, which is also an oil-producing country, a very prosperous country that I had never thought of Azerbaijan myself. It was not in my radar screen, but I learned about it. It's similar to Qatar that I visited. Qatar is very prosperous, very sophisticated. We're not talking about backward countries that use burqa. No longer women are very so business. The other part is civil society and indigenous peoples. I see some friends here from that represent indigenous populations. So indigenous peoples are gaining, os povos indígenas estão ganhando cada vez mais espaço, né, nas COPs. E isso é algo que vai ser muito importante na COP de Belém. We're working together with Minister Sonia Guajajara, who is a fantastic woman. So Brazil has a number of highly qualified representatives. Sonia Guajajara being one, as we call her, Sonia. Sonia is a warrior, is a woman that has led the Association of Indigenous Peoples of Brazil, APIB, for many years, and she's become a minister, and she's very vocal and very active. One thing that we're doing together with her, I was mentioning this to Anna, is to carry out a training program for indigenous leaders to have a participation in the official COP.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rob de Laat. I'm from the Eco Restoration Alliance. I'm Dutch, but I also live part of my life in Brazil. I'd like to underline the urgency and the emergency we're in. And I have a very specific reason for it, because I've been studying with some scientists who have been working on the biotic pump theory since 2007. And Anastasia Markarieva, Antonio Nobre, Peter Banyard. And they have basically shown that a large part of the rain-making, wind-making, cloud forming over the Amazon is a self-sustaining system. Which, by the way, as a total cooling, cools the planet by 1.3 times the amount of what we're heating up right now, the planet. So it's actually cooling the planet down more than what CO2 is heating it up. If you remove the forest, and that's basically what is happening now, because it will go into a tailspin, the total additional temperature to the planet will be 2 degrees centigrade, which is not in the IPCC models because the hydrology is not correctly in the IPCC models. So, and it's a self-sustaining process of dieback, and if we don't stop that, and I think I have sort of the contours of a plan which I'd like to discuss with you, then basically it will get out of hand, and it will be a disaster for Brazil, for its water supply, for its food production, etc. So I think I just want to underline that the emergency is very, very great. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Josh. Antonio Nobre is a colleague of mine. We did our undergraduate work together, and I admire a lot of what he does as a scientist. And you're quite right. The simple explanation is the following. We have east to west winds in the Amazon, and the rain that falls, say, in Belém, evaporates and transpires to clouds, but it does so together with perfumes of the forest, called the volatile organic compounds. And as they go to the clouds, that makes the likelihood and the speed of them coming back as rain faster. So there are many cycles. The first one to study this was Enes Salati. Many years ago, he did that with using isotopes. And so the rain falls and comes back in a cycle. And what happens is that when we have more deforestation and more forest fires, this cycle is slowed down. And as it slows down, we have longer dry seasons. And the longer dry seasons, coupled with increasing temperature, which is happening worldwide, includes the risk of fire. And what we're seeing now this year, it is something I just wrote an op-ed at Estado de São Paulo about this. We have this year something awkward. It's less deforestation and more forest fires. Because usually we have more forest fires when there's more deforestation. But the Brazilian government has been successful in reducing more than 50% of deforestation. This year, altogether 70% reduction of deforestation, so it's a big success of the Brazilian government in the last 2 years compared to what happened before. We had a government before that was very anti-environment, openly, and so we have to recognize the role of the current government in reducing deforestation, but we had an explosion of forest fires. And how to explain this is very simple. It is what I've just described, increasing, and what Josh also highlighted. It's increasing dry season with higher temperatures. So a fire that would be a small fire becomes a big fire.
Thank you, Virgilio. I'm Rebecca with the Brazil Foundation. Virgilio, we have heard a lot about new initiatives of the private sector to bring investors to buy up large tracts of land and replant, sometimes using eucalyptus or other trees that grow faster to capture carbon. The proposal is that this carbon recapture will really help in reducing the effects of climate change. But we don't hear too much about how those plans and initiatives take into account the populations that are living on those large tracts of land. How can we work with you, with FAS, to ensure that the populations, the traditional populations that are on the land, are contemplated and benefit from these large initiatives?
That's a very good point, and a complex one. First of all, if you move from pasture to an eucalyptus plantation, there is a net gain. That's something that is plain clear. So it is positive from a carbon standpoint. The problem comes when the expansion of eucalyptus plantation displace small landowners because of increasing the price of land. And this has happened in eucalyptus plantations for pulp and paper in southern Brazil. Brazil is a big producer of pulp and paper. When I was a professor of forestry at USP, this was part of the curricula of the students. And the question is the scale that I mentioned. Oftentimes people associate eucalyptus with something which is bad, but it's a fantastic tree. I remember the Nobel Prize, Peace Nobel Prize, Wangara Maathai in Africa, and her pitch was to have women planting small lots of eucalyptus to provide firewood to their household economy. So eucalyptus is great. The question is the monoculture that displaces local and small farmers, and that's not an easy thing to manage because it's sort of market driven. What I think would be the most appropriate way of capturing carbon is through agroforestry systems that are a combination of various species that planted together. This was a discipline that I used to teach when I was a professor at the university. And you can have a diverse set of crops that are more resilient because climate change also affects trees. So if you have a fruit tree, for example, Tucumã, this year Tucumã in Amazonas, Tucumã is a palm tree that produces fantastic seed that one eats. And it's not fruiting this year because of climate. So having multiple crops is good, because this crop doesn't work well, the other one works better. So I think agroforestry system using assentamentos, which are the settlements, make more sense from a holistic approach. What we're doing in terms of carbon is to encourage villages, such as those that you have visited, to have agroforestry systems to improve their diet with a focus on nutrition of kids. And this is an agenda that is very important, because schools, public schools, often have a procurement process that results in buying or in purchasing highly industrialized food, because it's easier to transport, the logistics, and also the system works in that direction, sometimes not very, with very good ethics as well. So we're encouraging that, agroforestry systems to improve nutrition and also sequester carbon.
So I come from my background is in finance, and I'm doing mangrove restoration and preservation project in the Amazon, in the state of Pará. So my question here, yeah, it's a challenge, especially coming from finance. But anyway, my point here is the way we see it, it's when investors look into the Brazilian market, it's great, it's a lot of opportunities. But on the regulatory side, it's quite confusing. And I know the government is trying a lot, a lot to kind of to manage, right? And to make the market a little bit more transparent for those who want to invest from abroad. Last week there was a conference, Lucca conference, Luxembourg, a lot of the government members were there, a lot of discussion, but so far nothing has been done on that front, right? Not concrete. So what's your take on that? I mean, how do you see the importance of regulation for foreign investors who are looking to invest in Brazil, especially in the carbon industry?
Well, first of all, I'd love to talk more with you about the restoration of mangroves in Pará. We are just with that agenda in the design phase, so it would be great to learn from you what you're doing. And the second point is that you're quite right. Brazil is a very bureaucratic country. That's the downside. We have many upsides. We are a happy country. We're warm, and we have lots of sun, lots of nature, but we have a very bureaucratic system. As far as investment goes, there is a will of the Ministry of Economy to work in the direction of facilitating investments. There is an upcoming law that will deal with the carbon market, and this is going to be approved according to what is being said in the next couple of weeks, right after the election, because there's bipartisan agreement, not bipartisan, multi-partisan agreement of both chambers to vote that. So as far as carbon, I think that's going to be a relevant step forward. In terms of investment, although it looks bureaucratic, I think the Chamber of Commerce can help in that direction, not only the chamber here, but the chamber in Brazil to facilitate. It's not impossible. I come from a place which is Manaus. Manaus has all the big industries as a free trade zone that have been operating there for decades. It has a GDP of about $35 billion of industrial output. So big companies doing business regularly, so it's possible. You have to have a good advisory, good lawyers and so on, and you find your way through the bureaucracy. And don't get desperate. Take a chamomile tea eventually, and go to the beach, have a caipirinha, and next day things are likely to be sorted out. And then we have jeitinho, which is something very unique of Brazil too. Sometimes the bureaucracy says nobody say, "Oh, come on, this is me. I just arrived from New York, and I need to get this done tomorrow." Okay. And then next somebody will answer, "Okay, my love, okay, querida." So that's very Brazilian too. So That's the upside.
Professor Virgilio, thank you so much. It was very clarifying what is going on in this climate world about COP30, and I think we all started getting packed, make reservations to attend. And so thank you so much, and we in the Chamber have a pleasure, and actually is one of our functions to assist anyone who comes in relationship with Brazil and the United States. And hopefully we have a panel like that, not a panel, an audience like that with these billionaires who will attend, because I think this is the main issue, where to get the money, how to get the money to fund all these projects that are great. Thanks so much, Professor.